Well, we've got 1 week of FPL left to go, which means one free transfer and one game week to try climb the leaderboards and get the best rank possible. The way you're going to do that is picking a differential. So I'm going to go through my favourites. So what I'm going to do to start off the video is talk about criteria for me picking just any asset in FPL in general. I've just spoken about this on my team selection video actually, and I think, you know, that criteria still applies to differentials. So I think there's two criteria to a player that I'd want to pick this week, right? Number one is they have a good fixture, and the Rob T FPL betting data is kind regarding that fixture, right? So I'm looking at clean sheet odds, and whilst I think there are some teams here that could probably keep a clean sheet, if you're looking to climb the leaderboards, right, and get a good finish, I don't think you're going to do that by picking a differential defender. So, spoiler alert, there are going to be no defenders spoken about in this video, because I think you have to pick yourself a midfielder or a forward, right? Because these are the most likely guys in my mind to haul. So teams that have good expected goals or projected goals. Well, we got Bournemouth. They got a really good fixture against Leicester. We got West Ham, who've got a good fixture against Ipswich. However, the only West Ham player I'd realistically pick is Jarrod Bowen, obviously the guy pictured to the left. And he's not a differential, right? In fact, I think Jarrod Bowen will be one of the most popular picks in the game for Gameweek 38, certainly amongst engaged managers. Could maybe go for someone like Thomas Souček, you know, backing him from set pieces. He's kind of playing a sort of number 10 attacking role now under Graham Potter, but I don't think I can get all that excited about Souček. Villa obviously against Man United, but again, I think the known assets, probably best assets from Villa are Rodgers and Watkins, and neither of those are really differential anymore. Chelsea, again, you know, you got Cole Palmer. But actually, to be fair, he's a potential differential, to be honest. I'm not actually going to specifically talk about him. He could be quite a good pick. But again, that Nottingham Forest defence is obviously really strong. Tottenham playing Brighton. Brighton have got good goal odds. And, well, we'll see what happens in the Europa League. I'm recording this video just after I finish work on Wednesday evening, so the Europa League final is tonight. I think regardless of how that Europa League final plays out, I think Tottenham might be just hungover on the weekend. You know, whether they win, they'll obviously be out partying, hungover. And if they lose, I think they'll be in a bit of a mental slump, to be honest. So I back Brighton to do well in that one. Man City, but are there realistically any real Man City differentials? Potentially, I'm not going to talk about him specifically because it's quite hard to get him in your team, but you could suggest Erling Haaland, although his form of recent probably doesn't suggest that. You could target maybe some Liverpool players, expecting them to rotate for their final game of the season. Newcastle have got Everton, could be some Newcastle differentials. Arsenal have got Southampton, that's obviously a good fixture, probably, you know, alongside Bournemouth. Those two teams have the best fixture this week. And then you've got Brentford against Wolves as well. So one key factor is projected goals and the quality of fixtures that these teams have got. And the next key factor for me would be, well, teams with something left to play for. And for me, there are 7 teams that probably have something left to play for this season. Given that Bournemouth have just lost to Man City, there's absolutely no way that they can qualify for Europe now. And there's a slim chance, depending on Chelsea's results, as to whether 7th place could get you, or 8th, I can't remember, I think it's 7th place, isn't it, that could get you Conference League. So there are, well, like I said, 7 teams that still have something to play for in terms of European spots. Now, I'm not saying every other team will be on the beach, but I think there is something to consider here in terms of teams with something left to play for. I think there's a real point around it. So we've got Man City, Newcastle, Chelsea, Villa, Forest, Brighton, Brentford. So are there any teams here, this is what I'd ask you, are there any teams here which you spotted have, excuse me, good projected goals, maybe clean sheet odds? Again, I probably wouldn't go for a defender. So good projected goals and appear on this list as teams with something left to play for. Okay, so with all of that in mind then, I have to talk about some Bournemouth assets. Regardless of whether they have something left to play for, I just don't think as a squad they have it in them to like do mass rotation or just completely hit the beach. So I think you could definitely pick some Bournemouth assets. And right now, I think the informed Bournemouth asset to go for from an attacking perspective is Evanilson. And he is an uber differential. 3.4% owned in total in the game. And he's 2.23% owned in the top 100k. I'll leave a link in the description to Live FPL where I get the top 100k effective ownership from. I expect that to probably go up for Game Week 38, but I can't imagine it'll go too much, if at all, anywhere near 10%. And yeah, I just think he's the Bournemouth player in form at the moment from an attacking perspective. Not quite, well, on recent form, not quite as good as Evan Nilsson, but I still think Clyburn could be pretty decent. I mean, we all know he's the designated Bournemouth penalty taker, and that just means in every single game he plays, he has a chance to score a goal, even if he's not playing that well. I will admit, in recent game weeks, his form has dropped off, but he's still kind of that, well, talisman or sort of second talisman figure for Bournemouth. And again, I go back to, looking at the, well, not necessarily facts because it's predictions, but looking at the predictions from my personal favourite source, Bournemouth are joint top for projected goals. This is their penalty taker. So, yeah, I think he's a good option as well. 0.59% owned in the top 100k. So, less than 1% owned by engaged managers in the game. So yeah, I think he could be a nice differential too. This one, well, might be a little bit controversial. So I think there's some merit in picking Arsenal players, but I would be a little bit cautious about it. I think it's quite obvious that Arsenal have a good fixture against Southampton. And the quote from Arteta saying, finishing the season, going to the beach, etc., does make me wonder, especially when you look at the league table. Arsenal's position, unless Man City score an absolute boatload of goals, no one's going to stop Arsenal finishing in second place. But do think if there was ever an opportunity for them to do a bit of rotation, give some players some minutes, etc., could well be Game Week 38. Now, I'm pretty sure that Havertz will start, right? He played limited minutes in Game Week 37, and Arsenal have obviously been begging for a centre-forward pretty much all season. He's obviously not an out-and-out centre-forward, but he's certainly the best player they've got for that role in their squad. I like him as a player, and his numbers are not too bad. He's obviously not lit the world up in terms of goals, but I think when you're looking at him potentially facing Southampton, yeah, he could be a good asset, particularly when you consider someone like Isak, for example, could be missing Game Week 38. We won't know for sure if he will, I don't think, but that's something to consider. Could Havertz be a sensible replacement for someone like him? 0% owned in the top. No one's got him at the moment. And I would personally back him to start. I've got a good feeling. You can let me know in the comments if you disagree. I've got a good feeling that Havertz starts in Game Week 38. Now, I'll admit the other player is a little bit punty. And I'm not 100% sure that he does play. I just have a feeling that Arteta rotates a little bit and gives Nwaneri some minutes. And I think he's done pretty well this season. 6 attacking returns from 10 appearances. Obviously, not all of those 10 appearances have been starts either. He's done pretty well. 4.3 million. Again, ownership is really low and the fixture is really kind. I would say, though, of course, Havertz is the better option because, well, I think he's going to start. I have much more faith in him starting, I would say, Nwaneri. But there's always a chance, I would say, with Ethan Nwaneri. So, yeah, if I was looking at Arsenal assets, differential-wise, this would be my 2. And I definitely favour Havertz, but I couldn't not mention Nwaneri as well. And one player who I think he's had a bit of a disappointing season this year, certainly by his own standards, and that's Anthony Gordon. He seems to be back in that Newcastle team now, playing alongside Harvey Barnes. It's Harvey Barnes, Gordon, Isak up front with Murphy, well, in the last game at least, playing a little bit deeper. That's how they lined up against Arsenal at least. I think he could be a nice option, could be a good differential. I think the Everton at home fixture is obviously a good fixture, and as we just looked at the league table, Newcastle still have something left to play for. Gordon, when he's fit, he usually starts for Newcastle. I think he's probably cemented himself back into the starting 11 now. Although since returning to the team, hasn't done all that well from an attacking perspective. 0.06% owned in the top 100k. I think, while he's playing, that's probably the lowest ownership he's seen for a long time. Because he's always a good FPL asset, in my opinion. Even though he's only got 12 attacking returns from 33 appearances this season. Just personally, I really like Anthony Gordon as a player. I think his mentality is fantastic. His ability is fantastic. I think he's got a real good chance of doing something against Everton. And again, I'm not picking obvious players because that defeats the point of a differential, right? I think Anthony Gordon is probably one of the best differentials you could go for. And maybe, I mentioned when going through the goal odds, Jarrod Bowen from West Ham looks like he's got a good fixture, playing well, etc. Similar sort of price is Gordon, much less owned. I think he's a nice differential alternative if you want to go against maybe Jarrod Bowen, something like that. The final team that I gave a bit of a mention to that have what could be a decent fixture, depending on the result of the Europa League final. But I think regardless, Tottenham away is still a good fixture. And Brighton still have something left to play for. I think the best Brighton asset you can pick is probably Matoma at the moment. That would be my feeling. Then you might disagree and think you can pick another Brighton player, then maybe this video won't inform you to pick Matoma, but may just inform you to consider, you know, a Brighton player in particular just as a differential. 6.1% owned in the game in total, although I don't tend to look at, the reason I've pulled out the top 100k ownership is because the overall ownership doesn't really account for engaged managers. 0.05% amongst the top 100k, that's my personal metric for engaged managers. He's got 3 goals in his last 4, albeit they have, well, he has massively overperformed his XG, double the goals compared to his XG. But yeah, I think he could be a good option against Tottenham, and at that ownership, if he does well, I think he can propel you up the leaderboard. All right, well, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that and found it useful. If you did, please leave me a like rating first of all. Let me know in the comments if there are any differentials I missed there or if you disagree with any of the players that I mentioned. I've only gone through a handful there because I want to be honest about who I actually think could really make a difference in your team. So I'm not just going to list 20 for the sake of like grifting content and making a really long video. You know, I've thought about these assets and I think they could do well. The only one I've got kind of bigger doubts over is Manieri. I think the rest of them start and get good minutes. It's just Manieri I think is a bit extra risky. But I thought I'd mention him nonetheless. I think that's everything. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Goal to Goal channel, which should be just here, right about there on your screen. And that just leaves me to say thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.